abandoned building that has held homeless people for probably 20 or 30 years. One of those that was here recently was Paul Miller-Lever, and he has died now. We rescued him out of this place. He'd been in the hospital many times, but because of alcoholism was not able to stay in there, and ended up leaving the hospital, although he was in serious condition, and came back here, and he was missing, but I'm feeling he might be here. So I went in here and found him inside. The conditions in here may be very shocking, and I don't know how much we can even film because of unless we could come back with some lights, but we'll see what we can get. There's no heat, no running water. Okay, so the living conditions in here are really rough. The people that have stayed in here are usually too sick and too ill to even go outside to use the bathroom. So what they did was they would take one room and make it a latrine, and they would use that room for a bathroom. And there's businesses on both sides too that make it impossible just to go outside because of being in a public area. So I hated to think that anybody would be living in a place like this, but people are very desperate when they have nothing, and it did keep him out of the rain. When I came in here, I had to walk through lots of human excrement and everything in order to get to him, but I couldn't leave him inside. Was so full of excrement that they couldn't handle it anymore. They would use the next room. They would shut the door and use the next room, and so room by room, everything became filled with all kinds of things and trash. You can see as you pan across here that in trying to keep it a little bit clean, they swept all the trash to one side. This is the result of years and years of people that had no place to live and being forced to live in horrible, unsanitary conditions. When I came in here to rescue Paul that last day, it was dark, it was after dark, and I couldn't even see where I was stepping. But you have to do what you have to do when you're out to save lives. Are forced to live in these kind of conditions in abandoned buildings are addicts, and they have become so much in bondage to the disease that they have that they're totally out of control. And people say to them, why don't you just stop drinking? Why don't you just stop taking drugs? And they would if they could, and there may have been a time early on when they could have screwed up all their willpower and everything and gotten help, and many of them tried. Many times they've been through rehab. But it comes to a point where the bondage is so there. There are guys that the bottle or the drug is so tightly gripped in their hand that literally to set that bottle down on the floor is to break out in a cold sweat, and they become very nervous, and fear goes across their. They cannot literally be separated from that day and night. They wake up in the middle of the night and they have to drink. It's a 24-hour day, and it destroys them. And their livers are gone, and their kidneys are gone, and esophagus is gone, and it burns a hole somewhere, and they can die of internal bleeding. It's a terrible death. At the end of Paul's life, and we found him when he was missing, and I found him laying right here in this bed on this thing. But he was too far gone to be able to even get up and use one of the other rooms. That was the potty rooms. So he was laying here in his own vomit. He was laying here in his own excrement. He was laying here and everything. It was just dripping down the mattress, and I hate to be so graphic, but I just think people should know. I mean, they'll watch fake horror movies all over the place, but there's real horror in our own communities that needs to be addressed. And it isn't a matter of throwing money at it or asking the government to do something. We have to do something. Each person has to be willing to step in and help, even if it's just one person. Help someone that can't do this anymore by himself, is in such bondage that it's totally anymore out of their own control. Nancy and I came and got Paul out of here. He had said, I'd been here earlier in the day, and he said, no, don't bring me to the hospital, just leave me alone. But I couldn't let him die there. So we called, I got Nancy, my friend, who would be an ex-EMT. We came down and we stood here and called 911 and got an ambulance out here to take him to the hospital. We didn't know if his life would be saved or if it was already too late. But the EMTs came and they said, well, why doesn't he just go to a shelter? And I said, he can't. He's not able. It takes a certain amount of ability and stamina and health to even be in a shelter. Not that there's any space. We had 1/3 of our people fit in shelters. 2/3 are out wherever they can be. But anyway, they looked at him and saw that it was a hazmat situation. And so the 911, the EMT people, they called for a fire truck. And so we waited and a fire truck showed up. And they had to put a sheet kind of thing, and some of them held a sheet, and there was police here too. They held a sheet around him, trying to give a little bit of privacy from the motel next door, and stripped him naked. And it was cold. It was November, and it was cold, and they hit him. I imagine they must have turned the water down some, but they literally used a fire hose to decontaminate him before they would even put him into the ambulance and take him to the hospital, because they didn't want to take him to the hospital in that condition. So they decontaminated him with a fire hose, wrapped him up then in a couple of blankets, and only then would they put him in their ambulance and all that stuff. And I'm thinking, Lord God, hope he even survives. How are you gonna, as weak as he was, I didn't know if he'd survive even that getting hit with a fire hose of cold water to decontaminate him, but that's what they did, and that's how they handled that. Well, he went into the hospital for a while, and they did a lot of tests and said they can't really help him anymore. We'll send him to a hospice. So they sent him to the hospital. We continued ministering to him, and the nice thing about that is we were able to find family. Family came, and the best news is that he was able to have some coherent time with his family. He was able to meet with them. They were glad to see him. He was able to have some really wonderful quality time for many days in the hospice. We baptized him, and then first, of course, made sure he was right with God. He came to the Lord, radically came to the Lord. You could just see his face, that the whole burden of all of his problems and his cares and just came off of him, and he didn't have to die to be free. He got free on this side. And as we watched God wash his sins away, and he knew he was clean, he knew he was free, and just was able to join with his family in that, and they could see the change in him, and what a blessing it was for them to see the change in him. And then he just kept saying, I said, he's had something on his mind. I said, what's on your mind? He says, I have to have you. Will you please tell my story? Anytime you have a chance, tell my story. I don't want other people to, I don't want kids to start drinking and drugging and ending up like I end up. Don't let them end up like me with his kidneys gone, his liver gone, and all the parts of him gone, and he could not, at the end, then he went and slipped into kind of a coma for the last couple of days. And the most amazing thing was his mom had died when he was young. He was a kid. His mom died on October the 3rd when she was 47 years old. And Paul Lever went to be with the Lord and receive his complete freedom. And it was on October 3rd, and he was 47 years old. And there his mom was, I know, just waiting for him. And him coming on her graduation into heaven date was his graduation into heaven date. And all the family was really amazed at how he hung on, and then went to be with the Lord on exactly the same day as his mom. So it was just really cool. And we do share his story as we have opportunity.
Okay, there you go.
We're here with Paul Lever, and his wish is to share a little bit of his story with you. We're at the Wake County Hospice in Cary, North Carolina, and Paul has been living nearby in the woods, in the streets for a long, long time. We've worked with him at Church in the Woods in about the last maybe about 3 years, I guess it's been for Paul. And had a great joy of knowing him and his smile and his laughter and all of the things, and seeing the gifts and talents that God has put in him. But this is at the end of his life here in the hospice. And his last request was that he would have a story to share with someone, that someone would see his story, that someone would be able to know what happened so many times through drinking and the hard life of being homeless in the streets. People who are homeless have a very difficult time. There's no bathrooms. There's no running water. There's no any way to keep clean. There's no way to do anything. The homeless pick up a few dollars here and there through panhandling or wherever they odd jobs and things, whatever they can come up with, and try to survive. The life expectancy of a person on the street is, according to the insurance companies, is 47 years old. And Paul is exactly 47. And he is fulfilling an unfortunate statistic. But his desire is that nobody end up like him. He told me he'd been drinking for about 25 years. Lost one thing after another till there was nothing left. But then he did end up with something left, and that was God, because through all of this, he has found the Lord. He has found God. He has found peace. He has found joy. And we had a baptism for him a couple days ago. This is Friday, and that was Wednesday. We had a baptism, and he was wonderfully baptized. Buried with Christ, the old man dead, resurrected into the new life of the Lord Jesus Christ. And he was just spending wonderful, precious moments with God during that baptism. Got a foretaste of glory divine. It's been a joy and a privilege to meet Paul and to meet the wonderful members of his family these last few days. And his desire is that people would stop and think before they enter into this kind of a lifestyle, that they would be able to have a chance to live a good and normal life and not enter the path of drinking. He has cirrhosis of the liver. His kidneys have shut down.